The moment you stop trying to educate fools, your life changes. Not slowly, instantly. You stop reacting, you stop explaining, you stop defending your reality, and something strange happens. The chaos around you becomes predictable. You start seeing patterns, fragile egos, defensive arrogance, confidence without competence. You realize you were never losing arguments. You were donating energy. There is a cold, almost ruthless freedom in accepting that some minds cannot be upgraded. And once you accept that, you stop trying to fix them. You start managing them. This is the shift from intelligence to power, and most people will never make it. 2 centuries ago, Arthur Schopenhauer understood something brutal. You cannot defeat stupidity with reason, and every time you try, you lose energy. Not because you're wrong, but because you're fighting on the wrong battlefield. Tonight, you learn how to stop bleeding energy and start weaponizing silence. The intelligence trap. Most intelligent people live under a dangerous illusion. They believe truth is the objective of conversation. They assume that if evidence is presented clearly, if logic is structured properly, if tone remains calm and rational, the other person will eventually adjust their position. That assumption is the beginning of exhaustion. The average argument is not a search for clarity, it is a defense mechanism. When someone argues aggressively for a flawed idea, they are rarely protecting the idea itself. They are protecting their identity. Their belief is fused to their ego. To challenge the belief is to threaten their sense of competence, status, and stability. And the human ego does not surrender easily. You enter discussions with analysis. They enter with attachment. You analyze data. They defend territory. These are not compatible objectives. Modern psychology explains this through the Kruger Effect. Individuals with low ability in a domain often overestimate their competence precisely because they lack the skill required to recognize their own incompetence. This creates a psychological fortress. From inside that fortress, they feel intelligent, confident, unshakable. When you attempt to dismantle their argument, they do not experience curiosity, they experience attack. And when a mind perceives attack, it does not switch to reflection, it switches to survival. The more logical you become, the more dangerous you appear to them. This is the trap. You believe better reasoning will produce better outcomes, but reasoning only works when both participants value truth over ego. The moment ego becomes primary, logic becomes irrelevant currency. You are not losing arguments because you are wrong. You are losing because you are playing a game built on different rules. You are using precision in a system that rewards dominance. Until you recognize this shift, you will continue wasting your intelligence on people who never intended to think. Why logic fails against emotion. To understand why reasoning fails, you must understand how most minds operate. Daniel Kahneman divided cognition into 2 systems. System 1 is fast, emotional, instinctive. System 2 is slow, deliberate, analytical. Highly reflective individuals spend more time in System 2. They pause, they consider nuance, they update conclusions when new information appears. But many people operate almost entirely within System 1. Their beliefs are formed quickly, based on emotion, tribal loyalty, or personal bias. Once formed, those beliefs harden. When you present logical counterpoints, you are asking them to transition from an emotional state into a reflective one. That shift requires effort. It requires humility. It requires discomfort. Most people resist it instinctively. Emotion always moves faster than logic. By the time you finish constructing your argument, their emotional reaction has already decided the outcome. Confirmation bias activates. They selectively interpret information in ways that preserve their original stance. Your evidence is filtered, distorted, or rejected entirely. This creates asymmetry. You expend cognitive energy assembling facts, structuring arguments, and maintaining composure. They expend almost none. They repeat assertions. They escalate tone. They lean on confidence instead of clarity. Over time, this imbalance drains you, not because they outthink you, but because they outlast you. Emotional certainty requires far less effort than analytical precision. The deeper mistake is assuming their inability to understand reflects a failure in your explanation. It does not. Sometimes the limitation is structural. The hardware cannot process the software. Recognizing this changes everything. It shifts the goal from persuasion to preservation. Instead of asking, "How do I make them understand?" you begin asking, "Is understanding even possible here?" And in many cases, the answer is no. Detachment as a strategy. Once you accept that some minds are resistant to logic, a new strategy emerges. Detachment, not emotional suppression, not arrogance. Strategic withdrawal. Detachment begins with abandoning the need to be validated by those who cannot evaluate you accurately. Intelligent individuals often carry a hidden craving to be acknowledged as correct, to receive recognition for clarity, to win cleanly, but seeking intellectual validation from someone incapable of intellectual honesty is self-sabotage. Their approval has no measurable value, yet you chase it as if it does. When you detach, you stop providing friction. You respond briefly, calmly, without escalation. You refuse to supply the emotional resistance that fuels their confidence. Many arguments survive purely because both sides push. Remove your force and the structure collapses. An effective method is controlled agreement, not sincere endorsement, but amplification. When someone insists on an extreme claim, calmly extend it to its logical conclusion. Let them confront the outcome of their own reasoning. This is not aggression, it is exposure. Alternatively, employ strategic neutrality. That's one perspective. Interesting thought. I see your point. These phrases act as insulation. They give nothing to attack. You remain present but uninvested. Over time, you will notice a shift. Conversations that once drained you become observational. You begin studying behavior rather than absorbing it. Emotional spikes diminish. Frustration decreases. Detachment is not weakness. It is energy conservation. It is understanding that not every battle deserves your resources. Your intelligence is not obligated to educate everyone. Sometimes its highest function is protection. When a fool has power, detachment is simple. When the irrational person holds no authority over you, it becomes far more complex when incompetence sits above you in hierarchy. When a foolish individual gains power, something dangerous happens. Their insecurity multiplies. Deep down, they sense their intellectual limitations, but instead of addressing them, they armor themselves with control. Authority becomes their shield against exposure. If you openly display competence in front of them, they do not interpret it as contribution. They interpret it as threat. Insecure authority figures do not compete on merit. They neutralize perceived rivals. They question your loyalty. They criticize your tone. They label you difficult or not a team player. Rarely will they attack your intelligence directly. Instead, they attack your character. That is safer terrain. Here is the critical mistake many intelligent people make. They believe excellence protects them. It does not. Excellence without political awareness is vulnerability. When dealing with fragile power, subtlety becomes survival. You reduce visible brilliance. You offer ideas indirectly. You allow them to believe conclusions were theirs. You ask for minor advice on trivial matters to feed their sense of control. You give small, harmless concessions to preserve strategic mobility. This is not surrender, it is positioning. History repeatedly shows that raw intelligence exposed too boldly in front of insecure rulers leads to elimination. Concealed intelligence, however, survives and eventually shapes outcomes from behind the curtain. Your intellect is not a badge to display, it is leverage to deploy carefully. Power is rarely about proving superiority. It is about navigating ego structures without triggering defense systems. When authority is irrational, survival depends on restraint. You do not challenge the throne directly. You operate within the shadow of it, building influence quietly until the moment is right, the contagion of irrationality. Stupidity is not neutral. It spreads through exposure. Cognitive load theory explains that the human brain has limited processing capacity. When you constantly interact with irrational individuals, your mind works overtime attempting to anticipate unpredictability. You monitor tone, you rehearse explanations, you manage emotional reactions. This sustained cognitive taxation has consequences. Your patience shortens, your creativity declines, decision-making becomes less precise. You feel mentally cluttered, not because you lack clarity, but because you are constantly navigating someone else's chaos. Over time, you adapt to your environment. If your daily interactions revolve around trivial debates and circular reasoning, your thinking begins to narrow. You simplify ideas to match their comprehension. You restrain complexity to avoid conflict. Slowly, without noticing, your intellectual edge dulls. Environment shapes cognition. This is why distance matters, not arrogance, hygiene. Just as you protect your physical health by avoiding contamination, you must protect your mental clarity by limiting exposure to chronic irrationality. That does not mean isolation. It means boundaries. Choose where your depth is welcomed. Seek conversations that challenge you upward, not downward. Surrounding yourself with individuals who value reflection forces growth. Surrounding yourself with those who resist thought enforces stagnation. You cannot elevate your thinking while constantly translating reality into simpler fragments for resistant minds. Protection of energy is not selfishness, it is maintenance. If you do not guard your cognitive bandwidth, it will be consumed by those who contribute nothing to its expansion. The arrogance of trying to save them. There is a final uncomfortable truth beneath your frustration. Part of you believes you can rescue them. You think if you present the right evidence, if you explain patiently enough, if you demonstrate the flaw clearly, they will awaken. Their life will improve. Their decisions will sharpen. This belief feels compassionate. It is not. It is control disguised as empathy. You assume their ignorance is accidental. Often, it is chosen. Complexity is uncomfortable. Reflection is painful. Growth requires confronting personal inadequacy. Many people prefer certainty over accuracy because certainty feels stable. The original Dunning-Kruger research revealed something brutal. The skills required to perform well in a domain are the same skills required to evaluate performance in that domain. In other words, those who lack competence frequently lack the awareness to detect their own incompetence. This creates a sealed loop. They cannot see what they do not know, and because they cannot see it, they do not seek it. When you attempt to force awareness, you become an intruder. You are not helping. You are destabilizing their psychological safety. Resistance intensifies. Accepting this requires emotional detachment. You must recognize that not every person is on a path towards self-improvement. Some are comfortable where they are. Their limitations are not temporary obstacles, they are structural boundaries. Your responsibility is not universal correction, it is personal advancement. You do not upgrade everyone around you. You manage expectations. You adjust proximity. You conserve strength for arenas where growth is possible. The moment you release the mission to fix others, something shifts internally. The frustration softens. The urgency fades. You stop fighting gravity. You begin focusing forward instead of sideways. And that is where real power begins. Withdrawal without W-Mackness. The real shift begins the moment you stop reacting, not outwardly, internally. Most intelligent people think strength means confronting every falsehood, correcting every mistake, defending every misinterpretation. But constant correction is not strength, it is compulsion. It is the need to control perception. When you withdraw from unnecessary conflict, something uncomfortable happens. You feel invisible, misunderstood, perhaps even underestimated. That discomfort is ego detox. You are unconsciously using debate to affirm your identity, to feel sharp, to feel superior, to feel relevant. Once you remove that friction, you are left alone with your own thoughts. No audience, no applause, no resistance to sharpen against. This is where discipline replaces impulse. You allow false assumptions to exist without intervention. You allow small misjudgments to pass uncorrected. You let others believe they outmaneuvered you when the outcome was never dependent on their perception. Withdrawal is not passivity, it is strategic silence. When someone insults you, you evaluate instead of react. When someone dismisses your idea, you measure whether their opinion holds actual weight. Most do not. You stop defending your identity in rooms that cannot accurately assess it. Over time, you notice a new pattern. The less you react, the more control you retain. Emotional neutrality becomes armor. Your nervous system stabilizes. Conversations that once triggered you now feel predictable, almost mechanical. You are no longer inside the chaos, you are observing it. And observation always holds more power than participation. Intelligence versus power. There is a critical difference between intelligence and power, and confusing the two keeps many capable people stuck. Intelligence seeks accuracy. It wants to be correct. It values clarity and coherence. It thrives in debate because debate validates reasoning. Power, however, is outcome-oriented. It does not require acknowledgement. It does not require applause. It does not require the opponent to concede. Intelligence wins arguments. Power wins environments. An intelligent person may dismantle an opponent logically and still lose influence in the room. A powerful person may say very little and still direct the trajectory of decisions. This is because most social systems are not structured around truth. They are structured around perception, emotion, and hierarchy. When you insist on proving you are right, you reveal your need for validation. When you prioritize outcome over recognition, you move differently. You conserve energy. You choose battles carefully. You influence indirectly. You begin asking different questions. Instead of, how do I defeat this argument, you ask, what result do I actually want? Sometimes that result requires silence. Sometimes it requires strategic agreement. Sometimes it requires patience. Power is long-term positioning. Intelligence is immediate precision. When combined properly, they are formidable. When intelligence operates alone, it often exhausts itself trying to correct a world that is not structured for correction. Understanding this distinction shifts your behavior from reactive to deliberate. You stop chasing intellectual victories. You start building structural advantages. The theater of arguments and the illusion of victory. For centuries, society has glorified debate. We idolize the image of the intellectual warrior standing on a stage, dismantling opponents with precision logic, impeccable rhetoric, and a calm, commanding tone. Television debates, TED Talks, university symposiums, podcasts, they all sell the illusion that truth conquers all, that reason prevails, and that the one with the sharpest mind will always be vindicated. But the reality is far darker. Most debates are theater. They are structured performances designed not to discover truth, but to entertain, to signal social alignment, or to enforce tribal loyalty. Arguments rarely shift beliefs. They simply reinforce pre-existing biases. The audience cheers for the side they already favor. They do not witness the dismantling of ignorance. They witness a spectacle. And the participants? They often leave exhausted, frustrated, and hollow, mistaking their own emotional investment for intellectual progress. Understanding this theater is critical. The dangerous minds in history, Semai, Machiavelli, Schopenhauer knew this instinctively. They understood that outcomes are not dictated by applause or the acknowledgement of bystanders. A chessboard filled with spectators does not determine the winner, the board and the pieces do. If your goal is influence, survival, or success, you must abandon the illusion that debates matter in themselves. You must stop equating verbal victory with real-world power. Your intelligence is not a tool for validation. It is a weapon for outcomes. When you engage with irrational, ego-driven individuals, you are not participating in a conversation, you are navigating a minefield. Every word, every pause, every nod carries energy. Every disagreement fuels them. Every correction strengthens their delusion. And the more you push, the more you drain your own resources while inflating theirs. The truly dangerous minds understand success is measured not in who is right, but in who achieves objectives while avoiding unnecessary exhaustion. It is measured not in satisfying your ego, but in strategically guiding the environment, subtly shaping outcomes, and maintaining control while the foolish believe they are in command. This is the ultimate shift. You stop playing for applause. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop feeding the chaos of others. Instead, you act as the architect. You observe. You calculate. You manage variables silently. You move deliberately while others perform their ritualistic battles. You allow the irrational to feel victorious while you advance unnoticed. The intelligence trap is not merely about losing arguments, it is about losing yourself to the energy of those incapable of understanding. Escape it and you reclaim your autonomy. You operate without friction, without drama, without depletion. The world becomes predictable because human behavior, irrational though it may appear, is not random. It follows ego, bias, and self-preservation. Once you see the patterns, you can anticipate them, neutralize them, and operate on a plane above the chaos. You stop being a participant in the theater and become the director behind it. And in that transition lies the path from intelligence to power. Intelligence vs. power. Intelligence is knowing you're right. Power is not caring who knows. Intelligence wins arguments. Power wins objectives. The debate is theater. The outcome is reality. Choose which game you're playing. You clicked because you're exhausted. You thought you needed sharper logic. Now you understand. You needed detachment. Your intellect is not a classroom tool. It is a survival mechanism. Keep it sharp, keep it hidden, and use it only when it advances your ascent. If this opened your eyes, subscribe. But understand something. This is only the public layer. There are levels of psychological warfare that cannot be discussed openly. Most people don't qualify for them. If you're still here, you might. Join the architect level. The masses debate. The architect builds, and builds in silence.